I'll tell you something about restaurant kitchens. Everybody thinks the fire is the dangerous part. The open flame, the oil at 350, the steam that can peel your skin clean. But the real danger is the routine. 12 years behind the same station, and your hands start doing the work while your brain floats somewhere else. You become the machine. You forget there's a world outside the ticket rail. My name is Mateo Delgado. For 12 years, I worked the hot station at Garrett's on McCullough Avenue in San Antonio. Grill, flat top, fryer. I could break down a halibut blindfolded. I could temp a ribeye by pressing my thumb into it. Medium rare at 131 degrees, every single time. Tommy Garrett hired me when I was 27, fresh off a bus from Houston with a green card still warm from the laminator, and I hadn't missed a shift since. 14,600 dinners. I did that math once, on a slow Monday. 14,600 plates sent to strangers. Garnished, sauced, wiped clean on the rim. Not one of them went to my own kids. That changed on a Tuesday in October when the exhaust hood above Station 3 caught fire. It wasn't dramatic. A grease buildup in the ventilation duct, a spark from the flat top, and then a ribbon of flame climbed up the steel like a vine. We killed it in 8 seconds. Luis hit the suppression switch before I even turned around. But the health inspector was there for a routine check, which is just our luck, and he took one look at the charred ductwork and shut us down. 1 week, Tommy told us. He stood in the dining room with his arms crossed, looking less angry than tired. Full remediation. Paid leave, all of you. Go home. Remember what sunlight looks like. I drove home at 4 in the afternoon. I want you to understand how strange that was. For 12 years, I left the house at 9:30 in the morning and came home at 10:30 at night. Sometimes 11. The route was muscle memory. McCullough to Blanco to Hildebrand, left on Campman, park behind the dumpsters. But driving home in daylight was like walking through your own house and finding a room you'd never seen. The trees on my street had turned. Oranges and reds I didn't know existed on that block. Mrs. Pacheco's son had a beard now. When did that happen? I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a minute, engine ticking, because I realized something that put a small cold stone in my chest. I didn't know where we kept the good plates. Let me explain how the Delgado family worked, because it ran like a kitchen. Stations, timing, handoffs. I worked 10 to 10. Elena, my wife, worked 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Janitorial. Commercial cleaning, she said, in those big office buildings downtown. She'd come home at 7, and we'd have breakfast together. Coffee, eggs, sometimes toast if we were feeling fancy. That hour, 7 to 8, was the only time we were both awake in the same room. After that, I'd drive the kids to school, come back to a quiet house, Elena already asleep behind the bedroom door, and sit around doing nothing useful until I left for the restaurant at 9:30. 2 hours alone in my own kitchen every morning, and I never once thought of that time as anything but dead space between shifts. Breakfast was our marriage. 1 hour. Then she disappeared into sleep and I disappeared into work. My mother, Alma, watched the kids during the day. She lived in a little apartment off Zarzamora Street, 2 bedrooms, saints on every wall, and a kitchen that smelled like dried chilies no matter what season it was. Sophia and Diego went to her after school. I picked them up at 6 when I got my break, brought them home, bathed them, helped with homework, read to Diego, answered Sophia's increasingly complicated questions about the world, and put them down by 9. Elena kissed everyone goodbye at 10:30. Door closed. House went silent. We were two people working the same shift on opposite ends of the clock. We kept the whole thing running, and it never occurred to me to look at the machine and ask if any of the parts were missing. So I picked up the kids from Alma's myself that Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon, and you'd have thought I showed up in a helicopter. Diego, 8 years old, built like a firecracker, launched himself at my legs so hard I had to grab the doorframe. "Poppy, it's not nighttime." Sophia, 11, more careful with her feelings the way girls get at that age, just stood in the hallway and smiled. But it was a real smile, the kind that goes all the way to the eyes. "Your father's kitchen caught fire," Alma said from behind them, already packing their bags. "A small fire, Mama." She handed me Diego's backpack. "Take them. I have a novella at 7 and I don't need the noise." I took them home and I cooked. Not reheated something, not microwaved a plate. I cooked. Mole Negro, the real one. The one that takes 4 hours because you have to roast the chilies and the chocolate separately and grind them by hand. I made tortillas from masa, pressed them on the comal until they puffed and got those brown spots that mean you did it right. I plated everything the way I'd plated at the restaurant. The swoosh of mole, the torn cilantro, a curl of crema. Diego ate with his hands. Mole on his chin, on his shirt, on the chair somehow. He'd pick up a piece of chicken, dip it in the mole, lose half of it on the way to his mouth, then look down at his plate like it had personally betrayed him. Sophia took a picture with the little phone we'd gotten her for emergencies. "Poppy, this is better than a restaurant," she said. "This is restaurant food, mija, just on a chipped plate." "No, I mean, it's better because you're here." She said it casual, like it was obvious, and it landed on me like a bag of flour dropped from a shelf. I realized she'd eaten 1,000 of my meals reheated by Alma, served on a different table. But she'd never sat across from me while I watched her take the first bite. Diego looked up. "Can you stay home every day?" "No, mijo. The hood just needs fixing. I'll be back next week." "Can you break it again?" I laughed. First real laugh in, I don't know how long. Elena came downstairs around 9, surprised to find the house smelling like somebody actually lived there. She kissed me. Normal. Warm. She tasted Diego's leftover mole, said it was amazing. Got dressed, jeans, plain shirt, hair in a ponytail, grabbed her bag. "I'll be back at 7, she said. "Same as always." "Be safe," I said. "Same as always." Door closed. 10:30. I put the kids to bed. Diego fought it for 15 minutes, lost, passed out in the shape of a starfish. Sophia read with her little booklight for a while, then I heard it click off. And then the house was quiet. I sat on the couch. I didn't know what to do with quiet. For 12 years, 10:30 meant I was pulling the last tickets, breaking down the station, hosing the mats. It didn't mean sitting in a living room that smelled like mole and listening to the refrigerator hum. I didn't like it. Something about the quiet felt hollow, like biting into a pepper that looks full and finding it empty inside. 2 in the morning. I was still awake. Not anxious, not worried, just unmoored. A boat cut loose from the dock, drifting in a house that was shaped for absence. And then I got the idea, the way you get ideas at 2 in the morning that feel brilliant and obvious. I'd surprise Elena. Bring her food. She's been working nights for 4 years. Mopping floors, emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets in those empty buildings. When's the last time someone brought her a hot meal in the middle of her shift? I got up and made tamales. Rajas con queso. Roasted poblano peppers with cheese, her favorite since the day I met her. I had leftover masa from dinner, so it only took an hour, I wrapped them in foil, brewed coffee in the thermos we got as a wedding gift, put everything in a paper bag. Love in aluminum. That's what my mother used to say about tamales. The foil holds the heat the way arms do. I drove to the office building on Callahan Road. I'd had the address memorized for 4 years. 8th floor, East Wing. I used to picture her up there, pushing a mop cart through empty cubicles, listening to music on her earbuds. I'd picture her and feel a specific kind of tenderness, pride even, that she did this work, that she did it for us. I pulled into the parking lot at 2:15. It was empty. Not almost empty. Empty. No cars, no trucks, not a van for a cleaning crew, not a sedan by the entrance. The upper floors were dark. Ground floor security light buzzing like a trapped fly. I drove around the building twice. Elena's silver Civic, a 2014 with a scratch on the rear bumper from a shopping cart at HEB, was not there. I called her phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I parked. I waited. 30 minutes, engine off, window cracked, October air coming in cool and dry. I ate one of the tamales myself. It was good. Perfect massa to filling ratio, the cheese still pulling in strings. I sat on the hood of my truck eating a tamale I'd made for my wife in a parking lot where my wife did not exist, and I watched the building sit there like a tomb. Nobody came. Nobody left. I drove home. The bag of tamales rode on the passenger seat, going cold. She walked in at 7. Normal. Dropped her bag on the chair by the door, stretched her back, rolled her neck. God, my back is killing me. 5th floor had a flood in the bathroom. Spent 2 hours on my hands and knees mopping. I was at the counter. I'd already made coffee. I poured hers the way she liked it. Strong, 2 sugars, a little milk. I came to see you last night, I said. Brought tamales. 2 in the morning. You weren't there. The thing about silence when someone's about to lie to you, it has a texture. It's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of construction. You can almost hear the scaffolding going up, the beams being fitted, the lie building itself behind their eyes. Oh, she said. They moved us this week. Construction on the 3rd floor. They couldn't have us in there with the dust. We're at a building on West Avenue. What address? 4127 West Avenue. She said it smooth. No hesitation. That should have been the tell. Real answers sometimes take a second to find. Lies are preloaded. I filed the address the way I file cook times. Exact. Next night. Kids in bed by 9. I drove to 4127 West Avenue. Building existed. 2-story glass and concrete office complex, the kind that has an insurance company on one floor and a dentist on the other. Lights on inside, mostly in the lobby. I parked, went in. Security guard at the front desk, older guy, reading a Louis L'Amour paperback. Help you? My wife works here, cleaning crew, Elena Delgado. I wanted to drop something off for her. He checked his clipboard, flipped through a binder, tapped a screen. We don't have anyone by that name. Try Torres. Her maiden name is Vega. Maybe she goes by, Sir? He looked up. Not unkind, but final. Building maintenance is contracted through Clean Pro Services, 3-man crew. They finish by midnight. It's 1:30. Nobody's here but me and the furniture. Midnight, I repeated. She doesn't get home until 7. He shrugged. I don't know what to tell you. I went back to my truck. The bag from the night before was still on the passenger floor. I'd forgotten it. Crumpled foil. Cold tamales. 2 nights in a row now. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, and I want to tell you that what I felt was anger, because anger is clean and simple and it moves in one direction. But it wasn't anger. It was the feeling you get when you lean against a wall and the wall gives way. When the thing you thought was solid turns out to be painted canvas. I was falling through the scenery of my own life. I'd cooked for a woman who didn't exist. The Elena who left at 10:30 and mopped floors and came home smelling like industrial cleaner. She was a costume, a character someone put on like a uniform. The real Elena was somewhere in this city right now at 1:30 in the morning, and I had no idea where. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I drove home and sat in the kitchen, lights off, and waited. 7 a.m., the front door, her keys on the hook, her bag on the chair. She came into the kitchen stretching, mid-yawn, and stopped when she saw me at the table. 2 cups of coffee already poured, hers and mine. I'd still poured hers. 12 years of habit, or maybe the last act of a man who was about to stop existing and be replaced by a different one. Sit down. Something in my voice. She sat. I went to West Avenue last night. The guard doesn't know you. Clean Pro finishes at midnight. You don't work there. I kept my voice level. The same voice I use when I'm calling out orders on a slammed Friday night. Clear, no wasted words. You don't work at the Callahan building either. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me the truth. Right now. All of it. You get one chance. If you lie to me again, even one word, I'm done. Not, we'll work on it. Not, let's see a counselor. Done. Her hands were around the coffee cup, knuckles going white. I work at a bar. Her voice was small. As a bartender. It's called Noche Libre. I've been there 8 months. 8 months. I let that number sit between us. Why lie about it? Because it's not a regular bar. There's dancers there. I don't dance. I'm behind the bar. But I knew you'd... Who is he? She didn't ask who. She didn't pretend not to understand. That's how I knew it was real. The question didn't confuse her, and a woman with nothing to hide would have been confused. Long pause. I could hear Diego's alarm clock go off upstairs, muffled, the little digital chirp he never woke up to on the first try. The owner, Dante Solis. She swallowed. 6 months. I did the math out loud because I wanted her to hear it. 6 months. That's 180 nights. I tucked our kids into bed. I kissed you goodbye at the door. And you drove to him. 180 times. She started to cry. The coffee cup slipped. I don't think she dropped it on purpose. I think her hands just stopped working. And it hit the edge of the table and shattered on the floor. Brown liquid everywhere, spreading across the tile, dripping off the table edge. Neither of us moved to clean it. We sat there, the broken cup between us like a border marker. And in my mind, I was doing what I always do when something goes wrong at the station, running the timeline backward. When did this start? Where was the failure point? The bar? 8 months. The affair? 6? So she'd worked at Noche Libre for 2 months before Dante got to her. 2 months of pouring drinks and lying about it before the lying got bigger. February was when the bar started. February when Sophia had that bad flu and I stayed up 2 nights straight with her. February when I signed Diego up for baseball and Elena said she was too tired to come to the first game. She wasn't tired. She was already living a second life under a different name. You used a different name there, I said. Not a question. She didn't answer, which was an answer. What name? Elisa. Then, quieter, as if explaining it would make it smaller. Dante suggested it. First week. He said it was easier for staff, a stage name like the dancers use. But that wasn't why. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I wanted it separate. The bar, the nights. I wanted it to be someone else doing it. Not Elena. Not the mother, not the wife. Someone who didn't have any of that. I pushed my chair back, picked up my keys. Where are you going? To take the kids to my mother's, then to work. Mateo, please, please, we can… You had one chance, you used it. I went upstairs. Diego was still half asleep, starfished across the bed. I packed their bags quietly. Sophia was already up, brushing her teeth. We're going to Abuela's? She asked. Yeah, Mika, early start. She looked at my face. 11 years old and already learning to read the things people don't say. She didn't ask why. The restaurant reopened 2 days later. I was back at my station. Grill hot, fryer loaded, flat top scraped clean. My hands moved on their own. Sear, flip, rest, plate. But my head was in some other neighborhood entirely, inside a building I'd never been to, on a street I'd never driven down, in a version of my life that turned out to be a set for a show I wasn't cast in. Luis noticed. Luis always noticed. He was the prep cook, built like a barrel, had been in San Antonio since before it was cool to be in San Antonio. He knew everybody. Everybody's cousin, everybody's cousin's ex-girlfriend. If information was a soup, Luis was the stock pot everything simmered in. You look like you got hit by a bus that backed up and hit you again, he said during the break, leaning against the dumpster wall, cigarette burning between his fingers. 2 days without real sleep. Elena? I didn't ask how he guessed. Married men only get that particular kind of wrecked from one source. You ever heard of a place called Noche Libre? I asked. His face changed. Before he said a single word, his face changed. That told me everything. Mateo. He dropped the cigarette, crushed it with his boot. What's she doing at Noche Libre? Bartending. 8 months. And sleeping with the owner. Luis rubbed his face with both hands, the way a man does when he's trying to push the bad news back in. Dante Solis, he said. Not a question. You know him. Everybody knows of him. He runs that place like his personal kingdom. 2 arrests in 5 years. 1 for selling liquor without a renewed license. 1 for some money business that never went to trial. Nothing stuck, but the kind of nothing that stinks. He lit another cigarette, took a drag. You know the type. Drives a black Escalade, wears a watch that costs more than my rent, tips big at restaurants so the waitresses remember his name. Half the guys in this neighborhood owe him a favor or owe him money, and he likes it that way. He paused. Looked at me sideways, the way you look at someone before you hand them bad news. There's more. There was an ICE raid 2 blocks from Noche Libre last year. Some warehouse operation. Dante wasn't hit directly, but his name came up in the paperwork. They pulled his records. ICE. The word landed in my stomach like a stone dropped in still water. Immigration and Customs. Your citizenship application. It's pending, right? 4 months in. Mateo, listen to me. If your wife, your legal spouse, the one whose name is on that paperwork, is tied up with a man who's got federal eyes on him, that's a flag. I leaned against the brick. The wall was warm from the kitchen exhaust on the other side. I thought about the folder in my desk drawer at home, the one with every document organized perfectly. Tax returns, pay stubs, the marriage certificate, the application itself. 14 years of doing everything right, stacked in neat rows. She could cost me my citizenship, I said. Brother, Luis said, she could cost you a lot more than that. I took a half day and went to see Frank Aldridge. He'd filed my N-400, and he was the kind of lawyer who kept a baseball signed by Nolan Ryan on his desk and got straight to the point the same way, hard and fast. I told him everything, the fake job, the club, Dante Solis. Frank leaned back, tapped his pen. Your wife's personal life isn't grounds for denial by itself. USCIS doesn't care about affairs. But your marital status is part of your application. If she's linked to someone with federal interest, it can trigger additional review. They start pulling threads, and threads lead to interviews, and interviews lead to delays that can turn into something worse. What do? File for divorce before your interview. It shows USCIS. You've separated yourself from any problematic associations. It's proactive, clean. How fast can it happen? Texas uncontested, 60 days. If she contests, longer. She'll contest. They usually do. He pulled a pad toward him, then stopped. One more thing. You said she was paid in cash at this bar? That's what it sounds like. Then she has unreported income, which means your joint tax returns for the last 8 months don't include her earnings. That's her problem, not yours. You filed what you knew. But I want you to talk to a tax preparer and file an amended return separating your income from hers. Do it before the USCIS interview. If they pull your tax records and find a discrepancy later, you want a paper trail showing you corrected it the moment you found out. Another piece of the mess she'd built. Another thing to clean up. I wrote it down on the back of a gas receipt. Amend taxes. It went on the list, right below hire family attorney, and change the locks. Document everything, Frank said. Phone records, the alias, the fake workplace, the cover story. All of it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the family phone bill. Joint account, my name, nothing illegal about looking at your own records. The pattern jumped out once I knew to look. Every few nights, around 11:30, a call from a number saved as Pilar Work, 3 to 5 minutes. Regular as clockwork. I picked up the house phone and dialed. Hello? Is this Pilar Ramos? Who's asking? Mateo Delgado, Elena's husband. I don't know what you're... Pilar. I know she doesn't clean offices. I know about Noche Libre. I know about the phone calls where you pretend to be her supervisor. So you can either talk to me now or you can explain it to my attorney next week. Your choice. Long silence. I could hear a TV in the background, something with a laugh track. Mateo, I don't want to get involved in... You're already involved. You've been involved for 8 months. How long have you been covering for her? Something broke in her voice then. The sound of a woman who'd been carrying a secret that wasn't hers, and the weight of it finally cracked the shelf. She asked me 8 months ago, Mateo. If you ever called during a shift, I was supposed to pick up and say I was her supervisor, that she was on another floor and couldn't come to the phone. I only had to do it twice, I swear. Did you know about Dante? She told me she just wanted some freedom, that you were... She said you were controlling. I didn't know about any man, I believed her. I hung up. Here's what I understood then. Elena didn't stumble into something. She didn't trip and fall. She drew up blueprints. A fake workplace. A cover name. A woman trained to answer a phone on cue. 8 months of deception about the bar. 6 months of Dante on top of that. Layer after layer, piece by piece. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second life, built on the bones of the first one while I stood in the kitchen and packed lunches and thought she was mopping floors. You know what stayed with me? The word controlling. That's what she told Pilar. That I was controlling. Me. A man who worked 12-hour shifts and came home and made dinner and read bedtime stories and never once asked to see her phone, never checked her mileage, never questioned a single thing she told me because I trusted her the way you trust the ground under your feet. Controlling. She had to make me the villain so the story made sense, so she could look at herself in the rearview mirror every night and say, I deserve this. He's the problem. Something shifted in me after that call. The vertigo was gone. The ground was back under my feet. Different ground, harder, but solid. I wasn't confused anymore. I was a man with a list of things to do. I drove to Alma's the next morning. Kids at school, apartment quiet. She was in her kitchen transferring beans from a tall pot to a shallow one, steam rising between her hands. Elena's been lying about where she works, I said. She's been with another man. I'm filing for divorce. My mother didn't flinch. She tasted the beans, added salt, stirred. Her back was to me, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. She'd heard every word, but she wasn't ready to turn around yet. The radio was on low. Some ranchera station playing something old that sounded like it was written by a man who'd had his heart broken so many times it had calluses. How long? 8 months lying about the job. 6 with another man. The children? I need you for a week, maybe 2, while I sort the legal side. She turned off the burner, wiped her hands on the towel that hung from the oven handle. Always the same towel, or one so identical it didn't matter. Turned around. I never trusted her schedule, Alma said quietly. Not that she knew the specifics, just that she'd felt the wrongness the way old women feel a storm before the clouds show up. A cleaning job that runs 11 to 7. 5 hours unaccounted for in the middle. I asked her once years ago, and she said she took her break at a 24-hour diner. Read magazines. Alma shook her head. Nobody reads magazines at 4 in the morning, mijo. She put a plate of enchiladas in front of me, sat across from me, held my wrists. Come, luego piensas. En ese orden. Eat, then think. In that order. So I ate. Then I thought. Then I acted. Filed at the Bexar County Courthouse on a Thursday morning. Insupportability. Texas no fault, which means the marriage is irreparable and nobody's pointing official fingers. But my attorney documented everything on the custody side. The deception, the alias, Dante Solis's rap sheet, the Pilar phone arrangement. I requested primary custody of Sofia and Diego. Elena was served that afternoon, at the house. What followed was the worst 5 days of my life, and I'm including the day I found the parking lot empty. Day 1 she called 14 times. I picked up once. Mateo, please, we can fix this. I'll quit the bar, I'll do therapy, whatever you want. There's nothing to fix. I don't know who you are. You can't stay married to someone you've never met. I hung up. She called back 9 more times. I let it ring. Day 2, she showed up at the restaurant. Mid-service, 200 covers, every burner lit, tickets coming in like a paper waterfall. Tommy stopped her at the door. I heard about it from Luis. He doesn't want to see you, ma'am, Tommy said. Gentle, but the way a locked door is gentle. She left a letter. 4 pages, handwritten, and the handwriting got shakier as it went. She said she loved me. She said she was lost. She said it started as just a job, extra money, better hours than cleaning. And Dante was charming, and he listened, and he made her feel like something other than a mop and a schedule. She said she hated herself. She said she'd do anything. I read it in the walk-in cooler after service, standing between the shelves of prep containers, cold air biting my neck, my breath making small clouds. And I'll tell you, some of it hit me. The part about feeling like a schedule. The part about wanting to be seen as something other than a function. I understood that because I'd been a function too. A cook, a paycheck, a body that came home and went through the motions. We'd turned each other into appliances and neither of us noticed until one of us broke. But understanding why someone burns your house down doesn't mean you rebuild the house with them still holding the match. I folded the letter and buried it in the trash under coffee grounds and onion peels. Day 3, the texts turned sharp. "You're punishing me. You're using my kids to punish me." I wrote back, "I'm protecting my kids. That's different." Then I put my phone in my locker and didn't touch it for 6 hours. Day 4, she crossed a line. Showed up at Sophia's school without warning. Told the front office she was the mother, which was technically true, and drove off with her. My phone rang at 2:30. School secretary, nervous. "Mr. Delgado, we released Sophia to her mother at pickup. We wanted to confirm that was coordinated." I called my attorney. She told me to stay calm, which I was. Cold calm, not relaxed calm. And said she'd file an emergency ex parte motion. In Texas, when there's risk of a parent removing a child, a judge can sign a temporary restraining order without the other side even being present. It's fast because it's designed to be fast. That's the whole point. The judge signed it that afternoon. Elena was barred from removing the children from school or from my home without prior written agreement, and if she violated it, she'd be looking at contempt charges. Elena brought Sophia back that evening, slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the front windows, and drove off without a word. That night, Sophia sat on her bed with her knees pulled up. "Is Mom in trouble?" I sat next to her. "Mom and I are having some grown-up problems. Nothing that's your fault. Nothing that changes how much either of us loves you." I heard her on the phone. She kept saying your name. "I know, baby." Quiet. Then, smaller. "Is she coming back?" "She'll always be your mom. Always. But she and I are going to live in different places." She didn't cry. She leaned into me and put her head against my arm and we just sat there. "I want to be straight with you." That moment was harder than finding the empty parking lot. Harder than the confession. Harder than hearing the name Elisa come out of my wife's mouth. Because everything else was just between me and Elena. This was the shrapnel. Day 5, Elena played her last card. "You file this divorce, it could tank your citizenship," she said on the phone. Cool now. Strategic. We filed together. They'll want to see us side by side at the interview. "Already talked to my lawyer," I said. "Divorcing you before the interview is cleaner than showing up married to someone in Dante Solis's orbit. You actually made my decision easier, not harder." Nothing on the other end. Just breathing. She'd expected that card to stop me. It didn't occur to her that I'd already played 3 moves ahead. Now here's the part that would be funny if it weren't so sad. Elena went to Dante. With her marriage in pieces and the kids in my mother's apartment, she drove to Noche Libre expecting… what? A soft landing? A future? Some version of, "Don't worry, baby, I'm here"? I wasn't there. I'm telling you what Luis heard from people who were, and what came out later in Elena's own attorney's filings, so the facts are nailed down. She found Dante in his back office. Smelled like cologne and leather, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to answer to anyone. She told him Mateo knows. Divorce is coming. It's all over. Dante's reaction was instant. Not rage, not sadness. Recalculation. Like a man looking at a spreadsheet and seeing the numbers go red. He leaned back in his chair. Nice chair. The kind with the high back and the armrests, bought with cash that came from God knows where. And his whole face rearranged. That's rough, babe. Look, maybe we should cool things off for a while. You've got a lot going on. Cool things off? Dante, I left my husband for you. Whoa. He put his hands up. Let's not get dramatic. Dramatic? I lied to him every night for 8 months. I built a whole second life. For this, for you. Dante leaned forward. And I'll give him this one thing. He didn't lie. That might be the only honest thing the man ever did in his life. You didn't leave him for me. You left him because he caught you. Big difference, baby. A big, big difference. He explained it to her the way you'd explain a business decision to someone who mistook it for a love story. Elena, as a married woman, was useful. She had a life that ran itself, a home, a husband, a schedule. She asked for nothing. She expected nothing. She arrived, she left, she evaporated back into her real life by sunrise. Low maintenance, no overhead. A divorced Elena with 2 kids, no job, nowhere to go. That was a different product entirely. That required investment, time, money, space in his actual life. And his actual life didn't have space for that. Never did. That's not what this was, Dante said. And you knew it. You knew it from the first week. 6 months, Dante. 6 months and I'm just… What? Nothing? You were a good time. And I was your vacation from your life. And now the vacation's over. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out an envelope. Your check, last one. And your stuff's in a box by the service door. She sat in her car in the parking lot of that club, engine off, $800 in cash on her lap, and a plastic bag with a pair of heels and a lip gloss and a hair tie. The entirety of her second life fit in a grocery bag. I think that's when the full weight of it landed on her. She didn't trade up. She didn't escape into something better. She burned her house down and ran toward a building that was never hers to begin with. And now, the building was locked, and the house was ashes, and she was sitting in a parking lot at 2 in the morning with $800 and nowhere to go. 2 weeks later, Luis mentioned it over the fryer, casual as weather. Dante's got a new bartender, Vanessa something. 26, dark hair, big smile, same setup, works nights, goes home before the sun. I nodded. Felt nothing. People want you to feel satisfaction at a moment like that. Some kind of grim vindication. But it was just math. The position was open. The position was filled. Elena was never a person to Dante. She was a shift that needed covering. You okay? Luis asked. I was okay before you told me. Still okay now. He studied me for a second. You're a cold one, Mateo. I'm a cook. I work with what's in front of me. Elena, though, she didn't take the news the same way. 3 weeks after I filed, she showed up at Noche Libre. She'd been drinking at Pilar's apartment, where she was sleeping on a pull-out couch that sagged in the middle. Drinking alone, which is never a good sign and always a worse one than people think. She walked into the club and saw Vanessa behind the bar. In her spot. Using her shaker set. Wearing the kind of top Elena used to wear on shift. Laughing with a customer the way Elena used to laugh, head tipped back, hand on the bar. Like she was watching a replay of herself from 6 months ago, only the actress had been recast and nobody told her the show was still running. Something shattered inside her. Publicly. She threw a glass, not at anyone, but hard enough to spray across the bar top. She screamed at Dante, who was at a corner table with clients, and the words carried across the whole floor. The bouncers had her by the arms in 30 seconds, but 30 seconds in a nightclub is a long time. Everybody saw, everybody heard. Someone called 911, 2 patrol cars. She was cited for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. No arrest. The officers walked her out, put her in a cab, and filed a report. That report went into a folder. Folders go to courtrooms. Courtrooms go to judges. Family Court, Bexar County. Judge Patricia Langley. 2 months after I filed, I wore a button-down shirt Alma had ironed until it could cut paper. My attorney sat next to me with a folder 3 inches thick. Elena was across the aisle with her lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, which is the face you make when your client keeps handing you new problems to explain. Elena looked different, thinner, dark under the eyes. She was staying at Pilar's, and I'd heard through the grapevine, through Luis because everything came through Luis, that she was working part-time at a nail salon, legal, clean. But the judge wouldn't be looking at what Elena was doing now. She'd be looking at what Elena had been doing for the last 8 months. My attorney laid it out first. 12 years of stable employment at one restaurant. Primary evening caregiver since the kids were born. I put them to bed every night, made breakfast every morning, drove them to school when I could. Extended family support through Alma, who'd been watching them since Sophia was in diapers. Clean record. Taxes filed every year. Pending citizenship. Elena's side argued back. She was a devoted mother. The affair was a private matter between adults that had no bearing on her ability to parent. She'd left the bar voluntarily. She was seeking stable employment and had already secured part-time work. Then my attorney opened the folder. The 2 fake workplaces, documented with dates and addresses. The alias, Elisa, used at Noche Libre. The Pilar arrangement. Phone records showing the coordinated calls, times, durations. Employment at a nightclub owned by a man with 2 arrests and a file that had crossed federal desks. The disorderly conduct report from 3 weeks prior, complete with witness statements and an officer's notes describing Elena as highly agitated, unsteady, smelling of alcohol. Elena's attorney objected twice. Both times overruled. The judge was reading the documents with the focus of someone who's seen 1,000 custody cases and knows what the important parts look like. And then came the moment nobody expected. Rosa Vega, Elena's mother, called by Elena's own legal team as a character witness. A mother standing up for her daughter. Should have been a sure thing. The safest play on the board. I found out later that Elena's attorney had done a prep session with Rosa the week before. She'd said the right things in his office. Yes, Elena is a good mother. Yes, she loves her grandchildren. Yes, people make mistakes. He'd coached her on staying focused, on not volunteering information that wasn't asked for. Rosa had nodded along, said she understood. Didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't look away. He walked out of that session thinking she was his safest witness. A grandmother defending her daughter. What could go wrong? But a prep session in a lawyer's office is not a witness chair under oath. And Rosa Vega was a woman who had cleaned other people's houses for 3 decades, who went to Mass every Sunday, who believed that lying under oath was a sin that carried weight. She sat in that chair, gripped the armrest, and Elena's attorney asked her to describe her daughter's character as a mother. Rosa looked at her daughter, then at me, then at the judge. My daughter made her choices. I love her. I will always love her. but I don't trust her to be the primary parent right now. Elena's attorney physically leaned back. This was not the script. He tried to redirect, asked about happy memories, about Elena's bond with the children, about whether every parent deserves a second chance. Rosa answered each question honestly, which made it worse because honesty was exactly the problem. Yes, Elena loves her children. Yes, they love her. But love is not the same as trust. And right now, I trust Mateo to keep them safe. I think what happened is simple. Rosa could say comfortable things in a lawyer's office where it didn't count. But when the judge was looking at her, and the oath was on her tongue and her grandchildren's futures were on the table, she couldn't lie. She wasn't built for it. Some people aren't. Elena broke. Not the controlled crying she'd been performing for weeks, leaking tears, dabbing with tissues, the kind designed to make a judge feel sympathy. This was something from deeper down. The sound a person makes when the last wall falls and there's nothing structural left. A sound like something tearing. Her own mother. On the stand. Under oath. Choosing the man Elena had betrayed over the daughter she'd raised. The courtroom went quiet. Even the clerk stopped typing. I sat there and watched. And I need you to understand. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I was watching someone fall from a height that would change them permanently. She was still the mother of my children. Still the woman I'd loved for 13 years. Still the woman who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies and leave a warm spot on my shirt. The fact that she'd destroyed everything didn't erase the fact that everything had once been real. At least on my side. Judge Langley ruled primary custody to me. Elena got supervised visitation every other weekend with review in 6 months based on demonstrated stability. Outside, the sun was blinding. I walked out into white Texas sunlight. Luis was in the parking lot, leaning on his truck, 2 gas station coffees in his hands. How'd it go? I got my kids. He handed me a cup. Good. Now get to work. The new guy left 3 steaks sitting in their own juice for 10 minutes. I almost cried. I drove to the restaurant. I put my apron on. I cooked. A week later, my phone rang at 9 in the evening. Kids asleep. House quiet. Mateo, this is Rosa, Elena's mother. I hadn't spoken to her since the courtroom. I braced myself for anger. A mother defending her daughter, no matter what she'd said on the stand. Rosa, I'm not calling to argue. I'm calling to say something that should be said directly, not through lawyers. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire holding weight. Take care of my grandchildren. They are what matters. Elena she's not ready. Maybe she will be someday. But right now she's not. I know. I told her the same thing. She's not speaking to me. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be steady. That's all I'm asking. A pause. You're a good father, Mateo. My daughter was lucky and she didn't know it. That's her cross to carry, not yours. She hung up. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone, and I thought about Rosa Vega. A woman who'd cleaned houses her whole life, who raised a daughter alone, who stood up in a courtroom and told the truth even though the truth meant losing the one person she had left. There's a kind of courage in that which I don't have a name for. The courage to love someone and still say, not this, not like this. 6 months later, USCIS Field Office, San Antonio. I wore a suit borrowed from Tommy Garrett. Little big in the shoulders, Tommy's a wider man. But pressed, clean, the best I had. My paperwork was in a manila folder, organized the way I organize my station before service. Everything in its place, nothing missing. The officer was a woman in her 50s with glasses on a chain. She opened my file. Stopped at the divorce. You filed for divorce after submitting your N-400. Yes, ma'am. Can you explain? My ex-wife was involved with someone who had legal problems. I filed for divorce to protect my children and my integrity. I've been in this country legally for 14 years. I've never missed a day of work or a tax payment. She looked at me, nodded, moved to the civics test. 27 amendments. Declaration of Independence. Branches of government. I'd studied every night after the kids went to sleep, flashcards on the kitchen table, coffee going cold. I passed. 4 months later. Naturalization ceremony. 86 of us from 30-something countries standing in rows with little flags. The room was in the convention center. Big, bright, with those fluorescent lights that make everyone look a little washed out, but nobody cared. There was a woman from Vietnam holding her son's hand so tight the boy kept wiggling. A man from Nigeria in a suit so sharp it could have walked in by itself. A couple from Ukraine, gray-haired, standing close together the way people do when they've been through something. All of us with the same folder. All of us with the same piece of paper about to mean the same thing. Sophia held Diego's hand in the audience. Alma sat behind them in a dress from 1993, purse clutched to her chest like a shield, which is how she always holds her purse. She'd said almost nothing on the drive over. Just sat in the back seat and looked out the window, and once, when I glanced in the mirror, I saw her lips moving, and I knew she was praying. My mother prays the way other people breathe, constantly, quietly, without making a show of it. They called my name, Mateo Alejandro Delgado. Diego stood up in his seat and shouted, "That's my dad!" Whole room laughed. The judge smiled, a real smile, not a courtroom smile. The woman next to me from the Philippines whispered, "Cute kid." My eyes burned, and I let them. I raised my right hand and took the oath, and my voice cracked on, "I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not from nerves, from weight." 14 years. 14 years of showing up, paying taxes, learning every corner of this country from behind a grill, and now it was mine and I was its. Officially. Permanently. I walked out of that building with a certificate and a tiny flag, and my kids were on either side of me, and my mother was behind me, and that shape, that exact arrangement of people, felt right. Outside, I checked my phone. Text from an unknown number. "Congratulations. I'm proud of you even though I have no right to be. Elena." I read it. Then I deleted it. Not cruelty. Same reason you wipe down a station at the end of the night. The shift's over. Next one starts clean. "Who wants barbecue?" I said. "Me, Diego. Can we get brisket and ribs?" Sophia, negotiating already. "Whatever you want. Abuela's buying." Alma smacked my arm with her purse. Diego laughed. Sophia rolled her eyes. 3 weeks later, Tommy called me into his office. "Second location opening, South Side. I need a sous chef." "I'm a line cook, Tommy." "You've been a sous chef in everything but the paycheck for 10 years. Take the job. Better money, better hours, home by 8. Home by 8. "Yeah," I said. "Okay. That's it? No negotiation?" "I'm a cook, not a businessman." "Exactly why I'm promoting you." One morning. A year and change after the night with the tamales. 5:30. Coffee. Stove on. Chilaquiles for Sophia. Salsa verde, crema, fried egg with the yolk still running. Scrambled eggs with cheese for Diego, who would eat scrambled eggs at every meal if the world would let him. Sophia comes down with a poster board. Family tree for school. She's drawn it in colored marker. Me in the middle. Alma above. Diego and Sofia on either side. Elena is there, in a smaller circle off to the left, connected to the kids by a dotted line. Not erased, repositioned. I used a different color for Mom, Sofia says, so it shows she's still family but in a different way. That's smart, mija. Diego barrels in, slides across the floor in his socks, crashes into a chair. Poppy, can you make the eggs like the restaurant? These are like the restaurant. No, with the green leaf thing. That's parsley. You don't even eat parsley. But it looks cool. I put a sprig of parsley on his plate. He grins like I handed him a trophy. I sit down. 2 plates. 2 kids. Morning light through the window landing on the counter where the thermos used to sit on a night that feels like it happened to somebody else. I know who I'm cooking for.